morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Ask Me Anything, Business Processes. I'm Kimberly, and I will be your moderator today. Before I introduce our speaker, let's just quickly run through the GoToMeeting UI. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I'm going to be monitoring them during the presentation, and I will be reading them aloud to Greg, so he'll be answering your questions live throughout the webinar. Also, the presentation looks best in full screen mode. So go to your GoToWebinar panel, and on the top right-hand side, you'll enable that by clicking the full screen option. Finally, yes, we're recording this and we'll post it to our website. Usually takes us about a week to get it up, but everyone who's registered for the webinar will get a link, so don't worry about it. Also, I will probably be sending out a survey because we'd like some feedback. Our presenter is the infamous Greg Heim, Senior Vice President of Complete Paperless Solutions. Many of you have already encountered Greg on a training session or, perhaps another webinar, and know he has decades of experience in envisioning, implementing, and training on Laserfiche solutions. And his emphasis is always easy to use, innovative, and he likes to automate things, and he especially likes business processes. CPS likes to see themselves as client partners, helping to develop solutions to balance service excellence with efficient operations. So Greg, when you are ready, please start. And remember, as you have questions, please type them into the question box.
All right, well, thank you, Kimberly, and good morning, everyone, Laserfiche family. I'm going to be stepping out a little bit today. Kimberly, probably you're going to think I'm nuts because I didn't mention this to you either, but we're going to do some live installation, which I'm sure is going to ensue with some troubleshooting of workflow and whatnot. So hopefully everything will go as planned today, and we'll get a real taste of what it's like to implement workflow from the beginning. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the term workflow, first of all, because when we think of workflow in Laserfiche, we're probably just thinking about Laserfiche workflow, but we want to look at a bigger picture than that. So what this is a little graphic I put together. It says a workflow consists of an orchestrated and repeatable pattern of activity enabled by the systematic organization of resources into processes that transform materials, provide services, or process information. So it can be depicted as, a sequence of operations, or what I like to call it, just the work of a person or group, or one or more or simple complex mechanisms. A more abstract perspective of workflow would, just like I said, it'd be a representation of real work. Now, I want to take our view of this right now from like a 30,000-foot view, and I think that it's always important to look at the big picture of what it is you're trying to accomplish, from beginning to end. And workflows, here's one of my neat little graphics here too. Me and Kimberly were talking about this, but if you think about workflows and the pieces of it, think of it as little building blocks that build up a bigger picture of what you're trying to accomplish, whether it be a business process or multiple business processes that involve, the processing of documents for approval, collaboration, distribution, whatever the case might be. And this can cross over multiple departments and over multiple applications. And one of the things that we've always said in the past is Laserfiche is so flexible and so powerful that it is kind of the glue that binds everything together because it's so easily integrated and so easily configurable out of the box. Okay. Now, keeping in mind, the bigger process or the bigger picture of workflow, we're going to take a look at three things today. We're going to look at Laserfiche forms, And we're going to start with that, actually, and we're going to start with a process modeler. And the reason we're going to do that is because Laserfiche Forms comes with a process modeler library of business processes that are already built by other organizations, by Laserfiche engineers, and by people that have submitted these workflows as into the, I think it's a PDP program or however they get them, I don't know. But we're going to take a look at that library first of all. We're going to talk and take a quick look at quick fields, which is another picture, that part of the picture in the puzzle for processing information and then the workflow schema of getting things through. And then lastly,
Greg,
we're going to take, yes.
Sorry, can I interrupt for a second?
Absolutely.
So workflows that you see in the Laserfiche workflow library are created by VARs, but they're also created by clients. So you do have the ability to submit your workflow for your organization to share for other cities or other organizations of your type. And I think that's fantastic. And that's all I had to say.
Right on, right on. And yeah, we're going to take a look at that library. Now, I'm not 100% sure if it tells us who submitted it or what. It may in some cases, but yeah, it's really nice to have that type of a collaboration over such a powerful product too. Now, the reason that we're going to take a look at that one first, like I said, because it's easier, in my opinion, to take something that's already completed, the big picture of it from beginning to end, and it allows you to learn workflow a little bit quicker and a little bit easier. If you try to start with just one module and build from the ground up, it's not as recognizable, the overall thing. And sometimes what that creates is extra work for us, and we don't want to do that because we have this picture of what it should look like, but when we dive into the workflow and start doing it, we realize that, hey, that's not the way it should be done. We should have looked at the big picture first. Anyway, and then lastly, what we're going to do is we're actually going to take and build a workflow in the Laserfiche core workflow and talk about the tools, the search capabilities, the reporting capabilities, and some of the things that are in that. So I have a lot to cover, and I'm going to jump in right now with the Forms application. Now, let me get this on the screen. Let's see, that is the Laserfiche client. We got Forms right over here. Now, the Laserfiche Forms application, some of you may or may not be familiar with it. Everybody who has Laserfiche has a version of Forms, one version or another. And if you need more information, you can get with your Laserfiche distributor to get more details. Now, in this case, I'm going to assume that you're familiar with Laserfiche, you're getting into a 101 workflow webinar to take it to the next level. So I'm not going to bore you with the details about Forms. I'm going to jump right into designing a form from the library that Laserfiche gives us. Now, you notice when I clicked on the design function after I logged into Laserfiche Forms, and this uses your Laserfiche Windows credentials, passes through and allows you into this front-end application, all right? Now, this business process library that was mentioned is got multiple categories for it: accounting, finance, management, human resources, IT, legal, so on and so forth. And there's a whole long list of different types of business processes and things that people have created. Okay, you'll also notice that with the category and the type of form it is, it also gives us a complexity level, right? And this is like, okay, it's going to, complexity level 1 should be the easiest to bring in versus complexity level 3 where there's a lot more involved. Now, Kim, I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but I'm going to jump in on one, and it's probably going to be broken from the get-go, but I think troubleshooting is important too. So hopefully what's going to happen is we're going to be able to install this and actually troubleshoot it and get it working within the time allotted. So we're going to do a little bit more complicated level 1, and I think it was called vacation something or other. Oh,
Greg is the MacGyver of workflow. That's all I have to say.
Sure. All right. Vacation sick leave request is what I chose from the library. And this is a level 1, complexity level 1. Now, I haven't done anything with it yet. What you see on the screen right now is the dialogue of what we're wanting to import. And it says the description here, once an employee requests vacation or sick leave The form is sent to a supervisor for approval. If the request is approved by Human Resources, the department is notified. The form is saved in the repository. Participants, the employee who submits, and the supervisor. Laserfiche repository is involved, and there's an approval process built in. Now, it gives you the files up here, but before we do that, it also gives you screenshots of what it looks like. And you see this kind of scrolling through. Let's go to the next screen. Now, this is the process modeler. This is what it looks like on the back end of a Laserfiche Forms workflow. This is what we're going to import right now. And this is why I was talking about the big picture, because if you look at this, this is the business process from where the employee submits through the form, and then it goes through a certain workflow, so to speak, what type of leave it is, whether it's sick or whether it's vacation, and then it, that's not the right thing, let me scroll over here. Then it goes through the whole process, notifying HR, notifying the supervisor, so on and so forth, and then at the end saving it to the repository. So there's the workflow, and then it also gives us a screenshot of what the form actually looks like. Now this is what the end user will be filling out. Now as you can see, I like working with something that's already pre-built because it allows us to wrap our head around workflow a little bit easier than starting from scratch. So this particular process, we have the ability to download files, and we have the ability to import the process. Now, we'll talk about both of these as we bring them in. First off, I'm going to go ahead and download, import following, okay, and let that come down. Got 1 second here. Oh, there it is up there. Okay, and it says open file. Let me go ahead and, oh, it's a briefcase. So what this is going to be, you guys, is Laserfiche files. It's going to be a Laserfiche file that's going to be imported into Laserfiche. Right here we go. And let's see here. Let me browse, see where I want to put it. I want to put it in departments. Let's see here. I'll just put it in administration and then quality assurance. All right, and we'll bring those files in. All right, now the reason that Laserfiche gives us a briefcase file is it has a file that has a template assigned to it, and that template is part of this workflow. So Laserfiche has got this all built out and tested for us to work. So it's wanting us to reassign template, say okay, add vacation sick leave. Yes, okay, so I'm going to actually bring that in. All right, so now that document should be sitting in Laserfiche, and it's going to be in departments. And for those of you who don't know what this application is, this is the Laserfiche Thin client. This is the web-based version of Laserfiche. Some are old school, and some, we're moving forward with the web-based applications, and that's what this is. I'm one of the old school guys. I'm one of those people that believe if it's not broke, don't fix it. And so there you go. Let's see here. All right, so it should have been brought in, quality assurance, what have you, a business process library. Here we go. Vacation sick leave request. And you'll notice that it's got a human resources form to be processed, and it brought in some documents for us as sample to use with this particular workflow. And along with that, you'll notice that it brought in this template vacation sick leave request that didn't exist in my system, okay? Now, let's go back to the next step of this. We have the import process. Now, the import process is an XML file. It's a set of instructions to build out this particular workflow in our installation of Laserfiche Forms. So what it's doing right now is it's reading that XML file and it's importing that business process that we just took a snapshot, looked at, into the system. Now here it is, okay? Now let me show you what's on the screen here. So you have the process itself, the forms are listed on the left-hand side here, and these are the forms that collect the information or the metadata on the front end. Now, these forms, and if you guys have been on some of my webinars previous, these forms are built by just simply dragging and dropping objects from our toolbox from the left over to the right, to your palette, what I call it, and building out the form and configuring, what each field is supposed to be, what each field is supposed to do, and the tokens that they collect or the metadata they collect, right? And then you can even view this form real time once it's brought in. You can change the look and feel of it. You can put your own logo in, those types of things, and make it match like your website or what have you. It gives us all those things in the layout. You got themes over here. Let me show you this really quick. Themes uses a thing called cascading style sheets, and it changes the look and feel of the forms, the web-based forms, with a single click. So right now I can just click on a different customized preset, and you notice that it's changing this vacation sick leave form, adding different logos and different backgrounds and what have you. Okay. All right. We also have the ability to put in custom script. We're not going to go into that today, but just so you know that it's there. And we have the ability to build out rules for handling the data that's collected and lookups into third-party applications such as an SQL database or something along those lines. Now, enough of that. Let's go back to the process diagram. Let's talk about this. So this is a complexity level 1, and this is going to run through the process of vacation sick leave, 2 different channels, what have you. So the first thing that we want to do is, you notice up here in the top right corner, we have this little checkbox that says validate, right? Now, if I check that box, it's going to go through this workflow, and it's going to tell me what's wrong with it just by checking that little button, okay? And it says invalid repository profile found, saved repository task, name saved to repository, in quotes. So what we're going to do is we're going to find that save to repository. It's right here at the end. And what it's saying is that there's an invalid repository profile, and that's fine. Now, if I select that object, you notice on the right-hand side I have this little details thing here, and it says invalid settings found. I'm going to just change this because I've got my own profile I should have in here. Hang on. Let me just edit this one. And I'll get something in there really quick, and it's G or MS. And local host, I'm just going to use because that's my local machine. And profile name we'll call Ask Me Anything.
Greg, I just wanted to mention that some of our attendees may not necessarily have all the rights necessary to at least see some of this stuff. So they should definitely partner with IT. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. And keep in mind, too, that this is a web-based application, okay? So the permissions that we're setting right now are not permissions on your network. They're permissions in Laserfiche. So if you are at least, and I'm assuming that a lot of you are administrators in your system, maybe IT representatives, or maybe people that are just curious as to, I've got a lot of experience with Laserfiche and I want to jump in. But yeah, you will need certain access to applications, but most of it is going to be through the Laserfiche application. Now, if we get into level 2 and level 3 integrations, then we're talking about integrating with, like an SQL server or something like that. Yeah. Now we're going to have to start looking into involving IT and having additional permissions, okay? All right. So I saved a profile that actually can connect to my Laserfiche server now with my repository name and my credentials. Now I'm going to hit that checkbox again. And now it says validation successful, no errors. All right. Let me save this. Now, the next button I'm going to hit, believe it or not, I'm just going to go ahead and run this because I think it's just better to do it and, when it breaks, go back and fix it, and that's how we are going to learn. And this video will be a tutorial, so to speak, for you guys to actually go back and say, okay, what did he do there again? So hopefully this will be helpful. Not just that, but I think we also put a tech tip out there. Yes, I put a tech tip out. It's been published on how to import this process, so you can check our website for that. Now I'm going to go ahead and fill this out, and I'm going to say that it is, vacation time request, and my supervisor is Kimberly Kimberly, are you on here? Yes, you are. Samuelson. And Department 1. And keep in mind on that form that I showed you, we could go back into this department object, which is a drop-down list, and we can define the departments. Like if you want it to be administration or finance or human resources or whatever. This, again, is straight out the box, and it's totally configurable and customizable by you, okay? Office backup name, we'll choose Tom on that one. Tom is our CEO. And beginning date, when am I going on vacation? Let's see. I guess we're going to have to go into the 1st of November, and I'm going to return on the 15th. I'm not going to do any comments, and I'm going to submit that. Because what we're doing right now, we're going to troubleshoot this. I can tell you very few times do I bring in forms from the library and they just work. There's always something wrong with it, okay? So now we were able to, come over here. Thank you. Still trying to get used to Edge. All right, let me close a couple of these things out here. So let's go back and you'll notice, oh, nice, check this out. So I just got an email notification in my email that says, hello, Kimberly Samuelson, who was my supervisor. Gregory Scott Heim has submitted vacation request. Please review, whatever. So Kimberly got this email. Right now it's coming back to me, and I'm going to show you why in a minute because we're going to talk about this workflow in greater detail. So Kimberly just got this email because she's my supervisor. Now she has the ability to approve or to reject. So far so good. Everything is working just fine. And I'm going to go ahead and approve that. All right. Now, honestly, I don't know the next step of this, but here's an important thing to note. In Laserfiche Forms, now this is controlled by security, whether you have the rights to monitor, manage, design in Laserfiche Forms. You have to have the appropriate administrative rights to do this. But we're talking about workflow, so we're assuming that you do. But there's this monitor tab that's in there that tells us every workflow that's running in Forms. And as expected, this is suspended. So it has a problem. So it's trying to notify HR of new submission, and it's been suspended. Hang on a minute, let me refresh that. Okay. All right, so first step. We are going to check the box next to it. Once we check that one that says suspended, you notice I have these tools that popped up over here, and one of them is to view the error log. So I'm going to go ahead and view that. It says, unable to send an email, please contact your system administrator, SMTP 365 recipients, so on and so forth. Doesn't really give me enough information. It's pointing me to the SMTP server not being able to send the email. Now, since it's not giving me enough information, the next step for me in troubleshooting is to take a look at the event viewer, because what Laserfiche does is for their applications on the server side, they actually write the errors to the Windows event viewer. Let me pull that up over here. I'm trying to get it open. And inside of there, you notice we have this thing called applications and services. And keep in mind, you guys, you're going to have a copy of this video, so you can go back and use it for reference. Where are they? There should be. Let's see here. Some kind of indication as to what's going on with Forms. This is taking just a minute to load, it looks like. There it goes. Yay. Laserfiche is right there. And Forms. So it's going to, let's see, operational. Under operational, it should give me some kind of message. Let's see, today's the 26th. And here's our message. It says, SMT server, recipients Gheim, sender. Oh, right here. Here's the problem. is that the sender of this, and this tells us to answer your question, Kim, who wrote this one? Case management forms at laserfiche.com. So this particular form came from Laserfiche. Unfortunately, this email account doesn't exist on my server, so it can't send from that individual. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the monitor. Hang on a minute here. I don't remember the name of that. We're sending it to HR or something like that, I think. Hang on. Notify HR of new submission is the name of the object. Let me go back to that process modeler that we had and find that object on the board, okay? And so notify supervisor. I did get, so I got an email in. So I already know that the email works. Notify HR of new submission. Notify submitter of rejection. Okay, submission, but they're all going to be the same. And you'll notice, where is it? It says send to, type username, right here. Show from, right here. So this is the problem, because this person doesn't exist. So I'm going to say it's coming from,
Greg,
you know what?
Think about getting to a point where you can stop. I have a question.
Yes, absolutely. Let me just make, because I think we're just about there. So let me go ahead and save that. Right, override changes, yes. And keep in mind too, this is just common sense on my part. I know that there's another email right next to it, so I'm going to go ahead and change that one too. Yep, see? So it's also got the same wrong user, so I'm just going to put in my email so I know that. Well, I just got an email, so as soon as I did this, you guys, I think that just came in and probably unsuspended my workflow. So hang on, let me double check. Yes. All right, so check it out. All right, so now it was able to send the email, and it says, hello, request vacation has been submitted and approved and is now awaiting HR action in the human resources sick leave to be processed folder. Okay, so the email is now working, but I still need to make sure that we completed this. And it is suspended one last time. While we're looking at this, Kimberly, go ahead with your question.
Okay, we had an audience member wanting to know how you found the error log and if you could show that again.
Absolutely. So the error log, and you know, down in the bottom left, I typed in the word event viewer, right? And what it did is it brought up the Windows event viewer. I'm sorry, I kind of skipped right past that pretty quick. I'm in a little bit of a rush because it's a lot to cover here. But what it did was it brought up this application, the event viewer, and this is built into every operating system, every server, every client, what have you. And what this does is it keeps track of all the errors that happen in every application on that machine. Now, it's broken down into Windows logs, you know, things that happen in Windows itself with applications and security. But in Laserfiche's case, Laserfiche actually filters their logs into a subfolder called Laserfiche. So you'll notice in the Windows Event Viewer that under the Laserfiche thing, you have not only forms, but you have Laserfiche Workflow, right? You have Laserfiche Notification Service, and you also have the Laserfiche Server, right? If we expand this, you'll see all the other forms, email archive, and what have you. So when something goes wrong with anything in Laserfiche, as a support engineer, you would troubleshoot it by looking at this event log first. This is one of the key things. Yes.
Greg, is that event log, you're actually looking at the server, yes?
Well, it is on the server, yes. And yeah, one of the things to keep in mind is that, you know, you can actually configure and run the forms configurator and designer from a remote node. I'm actually on my local machine, which is actually my server. And that's a very good point to make, Kim, is that if you're working on a workflow remotely, it's the event log on the server that you need to look at, because that's where the application is installed, right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Awesome. Good question, Kim. Good question. Thank you.
That was from an audience member.
Oh, right on. Well, thank you, whoever put that in. That's very good. Now, we're suspended again, and this one, if we click on the button, says that it's got an error in the save to repository service task, and that has to come after the email one. So let me go back over to that form. We're at the very end of this one, and we're going to move on, you guys. It looks like we got some time here. So, all right, let's go back to the process modeler. I don't know why it's not wanting to go back. There we go. And in the process diagram, we're going to go all the way to the end of this now. And it's got that save to repository object, okay? So let's look at the details for that. And it's not able to send it. And I'm trying to see why. Okay, this could be one of the reasons, is the volume is not set, number one. And since it's a save to repository, we have to check the name. And if it's saving metadata to the repository, we have to check and make sure that the fields are configured properly. Now you notice with this workflow, it's taking that template that it brought in from that briefcase that we imported, you guys, and it's using the tokens of information that we collected from the form to fill out the metadata or the Laserfiche template when it stores it in the Laserfiche repository. All right, so then the last thing would be save to repository, edit profile, save problem, save with name, save, oh, you know what? There's a problem right there, the path. Okay, let's fix that up. So we want to put it in business process library, human resources to be processed. There we go, and done. And save. Overwrite the changes, yes. Okay, now let's go back to monitor and see if we got past our suspension. So what I did on that one was I changed the default volume. I actually set it, because I don't know if you guys ever have this problem when you try to bring something in and it won't bring it in, and it says use parent's default volume, but you get an error. It's because the folder doesn't have a volume assigned to it, so that always errors out. It needs to pick the default volume if that's not available, if that makes sense. Let me go ahead and refresh this because it says it's in progress. We want to see that it's completed. Oh, thank you, Lord. Okay, so we actually imported, let me just recap what we just did. Actually, let me look in Laserfiche. I'm excited, you guys. Let's see here. How do we get to Laserfiche? Okay, so it stored that form that we just filled out, and it should have stored it in business processes, vacation sick leave request, human resources, to be processed, and here it is. So here's our PDF, right? And it's stored in the Laserfiche repository now, the form we just filled out, and then all the metadata along with it. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot to talk about, you guys, with what has gone on with this workflow, but we have to stay at this 30,000 foot view because of time. But you can always come back and reference this video, and you can always call your reseller for assistance. But what we want to do today is just get you over being scared of it, because, you know, it's actually pretty easy when you jump into it, and some of the troubleshooting techniques and things like that, again, we're putting into this video. Now, so this particular form that we brought in, let's just recap it.
I just want to mention that even somebody with Greg's skill set needs to troubleshoot. So
every time, Kim, every time.
Don't feel intimidated if, you know, you load this in and you have an error. I mean, even the experts.
Right. Yes, it's well, you know, if somebody creates this on a different machine, there are a lot of different variables, but Laserfiche has made it very simple, really. You know, and this is complexity level 1. It was pretty easy to bring in. You know, the level 2s and the level 3s have a few more variables to them, but if you know the troubleshooting techniques and how to get past each step, then before you know it, you'll be doing level 4s. Seriously. You just got to jump in and try to figure it out and use the event viewer that we said and the error trapping, and just try to learn as you go. Start with level 1 and then
question when you're ready.
Move to level 2. Go ahead.
Why is it that in our environment we have to correct the error, then click the retry icon for the suspended instance because yours automatically proceeded once you collected the error.
I wasn't hitting the retry. I was hitting refresh because since
Okay.
it's web-based, it just doesn't redraw the screen.
Okay.
So while you saw that, I got the email while I just after I corrected it, it went through it and sent it to me, even though the screen said it was still suspended, because I just refreshed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you betcha. All right. So let's just recap this real quick, and we're going to move on to a couple of other quick things. We got about 23 minutes. I don't guess we don't have to stop at 12. We can keep going if you guys are up for it. So here's what we did. So we went looking for vacation sick leave. So I started typing in vacation, and I did the same exact thing. And so I typed in vacation. It brought this sick leave request up. All right. We were able to look at this before we brought it into our server. Once we decided that this was what we wanted, after looking at the description and the participants and some of the things, we downloaded the files. The file that we downloaded was a Laserfiche briefcase, and it had a sample PDF of the form with the template that somebody built when they designed this particular form for the library. We looked at this form, and we looked at the workflow before we brought it in, okay? After we downloaded that file, we opened it up, and it opened in its default application, which is Laserfiche, okay? And that's how it was able to build that template automatically, because we imported it into Laserfiche. The next thing we did was we imported the process, which was an XML file. And that XML file is what built out the entire process, right? That we were able to just troubleshoot and view. And that is the process diagram. So now you guys will notice if I go into, let's see here. I don't think you can find that one here. You'll notice that in my forms library, that vacation sick leave thing is not here, right? And I got to finish this up by showing you why. Because once we get this thing working, right, we have to publish it, okay? So we got this thing working from a pre-canned template. Everything works fine with it now. Now that it's functional, I can actually publish it so it's out for consumption for the people in my department. Hang on a minute. I'm not sure why that keeps working itself over to the wrong dialogue. But that's just not nice. Let me do this one more time. We have a little refresh problem with Microsoft Edge here. One second. Let's see here. Options. There it goes again. Not sure what's going on there, but I'll just leave it at that. So we need to publish these things so that it shows up as one of the forms in our library, okay? Now, most every single one of these that are built in here came from the Laserfiche library. There are very few that I built from scratch. I'm one of those people too, and I'm going to say it, okay? If it's already in the library, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Why reinvent the wheel? All those adages. If Laserfiche has something in there that you can plagiarize and make your own, do it. I mean, I've done that with a lot of different dialogues that they have, because I'm like, well, why recreate it when Laserfiche already did it? I'll use that piece for this, and I'll just rename things and redesign it. So I do a lot of that, okay? So after we got this thing running and everything functional, it was able to interact with Laserfiche as well, and the Laserfiche workflow that's built into the core application. Now, let me go back to this vacation sick leave, and I just want to.
Question when you
go ahead.
Okay. Do you know if we will soon be able to bring a terminated item back in if you are able to fix the process? Apparently, this audience member heard that this is possibly a future feature.
Well, yeah, I don't know, but here's the thing. If you actually were to define the word terminated, it ain't coming back. So if Laserfiche does something in the future, it would be to add a suspend instead of terminated.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because the only way that these things get terminated in Laserfiche is if they're manually terminated.
Got it.
It can have errors with them. But yeah, so I think it's a feature that should be added, could be added, needs to be added, but they would change the terminology to suspended and terminated would still remain the same. It's just the way I kind of envisioned it. So, yeah, that's what I know anyway.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So just really quick. So in the recap of forms, the forms designer gave us the process diagram. And this process diagram, if you wanted to build one from scratch, has all the different tools in this toolbox, right, that you can just drag over to the palette and then draw lines from object 1 to object 2. You guys can see now why I wanted to start with importing one, because having this all done for me and having that business process available to me within 30 minutes, right, is important, okay? So just, again, when we brought this in, we hit this little checkbox to check to see if there were any errors with this workflow. It did find some errors. We were able to identify the object because it told us the name of each object that it had an issue with. And when we went to that object, we then hit the details button to troubleshoot what was going on. And to do that, when we were in the monitor, we were able to click on that little button. Let me leave this real quick. And this is just a little bit of a recap. When we had an issue, we were able to hit the checkbox next to the item that had an issue, and then hit the little tablet button, which showed us the generic errors, right, of what's going on. Now, after going through these errors are actually sitting in the application event log, okay? And you can go through that application event log and read this stuff, and, you know, it kind of comes to you after a while, you know, of these little errors, because believe it or not, when you have reoccurring, you have the same kind of errors all the time with the email, with saving to the repository when you use these canned templates and bring them in, okay? So you kind of get used to what it is, and sometimes you don't even need to look at the error logs anymore because you know exactly what's causing it. And in my case, after 24 years of Laserfiche, you kind of get a little bit of intuition that comes into play too. So, but again, these things, if you just go to the right locations and you read, will help you, okay? And then, you know, again, hopefully you can just pick up the phone and call your reseller when you get really stuck. But I would recommend that you just keep trying to figure it out on your own, because it's the best way to get back to where you're going is if you drove there the first time yourself instead. So you guys just make sure you jump in with both feet and, you know, pick up the phone and dial when you get stuck. It's fine. It's fun as well. I mean, this is the kind of stuff with every challenge or new challenge around every corner has kept me doing the Laserfiche stuff for 24 years. So anyway, enough of that. I'm going to move on because we're running short on time. And I want to talk about another component of workflow in the Laserfiche suite. And I'm going to talk about it really quick. This is actually Laserfiche Quick Fields. And it's important to note because, you know, we have to have information in Laserfiche in order to create workflows around it. Okay. Now, Laserfiche Forms was metadata and a form that we sent to Laserfiche straight from, you know, the web application. This is tangible paper documents or what have you. So that's why it's very important to mention, and I'm just going to breeze through this real quick. We might do a future webinar on just quick fields. But I want to point out a couple of things. Now, this is a scanning application that can be run on a local client station, or it can be ran on the server silently. And when we present it as an application that allows you to grab documents that were sent from any copier machine on your network to a network drive, pick those documents up from the network drive, and bring them in and process them. Now, in this example, it uses slip sheets, and the slip sheet is nothing more than, you know, a unique identifier that we put at the front end of every document. So we have, you know, 5 different documents. We have 5 different slip sheets, and on the slip sheet, it has a unique identifier. Let me show you the bottom of this, and it sounds really kind of silly, but I just simply look for a unique identifier, which is SC1375 CPS. Sounds crazy, right? But as long as we have something unique, like a barcode or something like that, that when it hits that page, it can start a new document, that's all we care about. Because built into Quick Fields is this first page identification. And what it has is the ability to identify the slip sheet, and we configure this down here. And we say if Zone 1 contains this unique identifier, then go ahead and use that to start a new document, okay? Pretty basic, pretty simple stuff, okay? The next object that we have is to capture information. Now you'll notice if we right click, we can put in different enhancements, right? To do border removal, to deskew, to despeckle, to rotate, to smooth, to do all these other things. The other thing that we can do is put in a page process to do a lot more of stuff like optical mark recognition or barcode recognition. Or in this case, we're going to use OmniPage Zone OCR. And with the page processing, once we identify the document or the slip sheet, now we're going to just grab the department off of the top right corner. So every time it hits that new slip sheet, it starts a new document, and then it grabs the department at the top. And it takes that little bit of information, and it puts it into our template over here on the right. And from here on out, once it processes that, and we put that little token in there, it just simply moves it into the appropriate folder in Laserfiche, and that kicks off our workflow, okay? Now, in some of the previous presentations that we've done, our workflow usually starts with records management, where we start with the base level and we do filing. Starting, by sending documents through to the appropriate department, to the appropriate folder in Laserfiche is where your workflow starts. That's why I felt it was, actually, I should say, I agreed with Kimberly because she felt it was important that we showed quick fields, because not only can we capture information off of scanned documents, but as soon as this is done here, we can also tie this thing in with custom coding. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, we can also run a workflow straight from quick fields as well. So we can call a workflow from the Laserfiche core from this application. So worth mentioning. This is all the time we're going to spend on it, however, because I do want to get to the Laserfiche core workflow before we run out of time. Okay? Now, this is the last segment, and what we're going to do here, I should have probably had this open already, is we're going to take a look at the Laserfiche core workflow. So we looked at Laserfiche forms, and that's a front end piece. We looked at Laserfiche quick fields, again, that's a front end piece. The Laserfiche repository, or the core system, has its own workflow. And what you see on the screen right now is called the workflow designer. Now, any one of you that has Laserfiche right now has this installed, or at least I hope you have it installed. If you don't, it's part of the core system. Make sure it's up and functional. Get with your IT staff if it's not. And if it's not, you might have to reach out to your vendor to make sure it's configured properly, okay? And not just that, but this application can be run from a local client station or your local machine, or it also, of course, can be run from the server, okay? Now, we're going to take a quick look. We're going to build simple workflow out of this, but most importantly, we want to take a look at features, functionality, troubleshooting with this. Now, the Laserfiche workflow, I want you to think of it as, well, I call it a gravity flow, object-based user interface, okay? What does that mean? Well, we have a list of objects. You notice up here I've got these little buttons that can turn my toolboxes. You notice on the left-hand side here, off and on, and then searching, off and on. So toolbox and searching are the two that I keep. And you notice that they're tabbed down here at the bottom, common searches and search, and then the toolbox. So what we're going to do here today is we're going to build out a simple workflow. Now, I'd like you to notice that the Laserfiche has categorized all of the little objects that you can use in this drag and drop, trickle down, whatever you want to call it, workflow. And you have, so many different things that you can do with workflow. We're going to keep it simple today. And since there's so many objects in there, what I want to do is I just want to show you how to grab information from a PDF that somebody might have submitted from your website. We kind of looked at this a little bit in our PRA webinar that we did last time, and somebody wanted us to expound on this. So I'm going to just type in the word PDF up in this top search so I can see all the objects in workflow that deal with PDFs, okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to retrieve information or content from a form, from a PDF form. And that falls under the title of information gathering. And so I'm going to drag this over to my project. And this project is called Workflow 1, right? If I click on the white area, you notice it's got the name for this. And I'm going to call this PDF data capture, okay? Now, with the PDF data capture, we have the ability to select a master form. Now, so what we want to do is that when this form gets filled out from your website, we want to drag and drop it into Laserfiche, and it automatically grabs the fields that, say, Joe Public filled out. We want to automatically fill out the Laserfiche template with that. So I'm going to register a form, and I've got this form. Hang on, I think I've got it open. Oh, I hope I have it open already, or I'm going to have to go find it. Hang on. No, hang on. All right. I don't know what I did with it. We'll find it later. Oh, wait. Is this it? Yeah, there it is. Okay. So here's a PDF form that we can fill out, right? And what is today's date? It is 10/26/2021, and I pre-filled all this stuff out to save time. And this is ask webinar and yada yada yada, and gonna save it. Okay. All right. So that form is what we're going to use and register with this PDF object. So if I go out here on the right-hand side, I selected this object, and I want to import a PDF form for it. I can come in here and add it. Now, I did this ahead of time, I think. Yeah, public records request form. And if we take a look at this, you'll notice that I can replace the file if I make some changes to this master form on the back end. But this is basically that fillable form, and I just downloaded it from the internet. And they did a pretty good job on it, so that's why I want to reuse it. So I'm going to select that public records request form, and I'm going to bring that in. Now, it's still got this little red exclamation circle here, and it says form content, no PDF fields have been selected. So this tells me what's wrong with the object and that we can't publish this until it's been configured properly. So I'm going to double click on this object and watch what happens here. It brings up this UI, or user interface, with the different pages, page 1 and page 2 of this form. You notice on page 1, though, it's got all these form fields that we filled out. So I can come in here and I want to add date. I'm just going to add them all, you guys. And let me do this really fast and not talk so much because I don't want to take up any of your lunchtime. All right, so I'm going to add all these fields. And I really don't need to do anything except those are the fields that I want to use in my workflow. So I'm going to say OK to that. Okay, now you notice my little exclamation mark went away. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to assign these fields to my Laserfiche template that I'm going to use, right? So let's see, I'm going to assign, so I'm going to typing in assign, and you notice that in my toolbox it brought up all the different things that have the assign, and we're going to assign field values. So I'm just going to grab that object, I'm going to drag it underneath the retrieve PDF form content. Remember I told you that this is a gravity flow object-based UI. Everything flows downhill, right? It's like if you had a faucet turned on and everything's flowing this way. We can run in parallel, we can run sequences, we can do all these other things. But we're going to assign these field values, right? And we want to assign a new template, and this is going to be public records requests. And I already have this template built out in my Laserfiche, and I did it through the Laserfiche administration console. If you guys are familiar with building out templates and building out things using the admin console, that's where you do it. And now here, I want to add the fields that I want to update. And I'm going to update these fields based on, let's see here. Oh, I don't have enough in that template to do it. Hang on, let me find something else. Oh, shoot, Scooby. We'll do city records. There we go. All right, and I'm going to select all and say OK. Now, what's nice about this is you notice I have address selected up at the top. And if I had address in that PDF form, then that token should now show up. So I click on this field value, and you see this little button to the right? It's a little right angle bracket. If I click on that, it shows me that object, this one up here, the retrieve PDF from form content. It shows me that object and all those fields that I just said I wanted to use. So I'm going to pick address from that. I'm not going to do an agenda box number. That's all these other kind of things, so on and so forth. Department, I don't care. Let's see, document date, and again, I can retrieve that content, you know, from the right. Okay, And then I can go to the email and say, okay, from the PDF content, grab the email, so on and so forth. So I fill all that information out, okay? Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename the object, okay? So now that I've got it in there, I just want to rename it to, let's see, we could put in the email, you know, whatever token values we have in there, and we can say that this is PRA4, and it'll pull the email address that's in there, what have you, and whatever we want to put in there, and then, you know, maybe well, I got the wrong template, but whatever the name might be, okay? So now, believe it or not, you guys, here's a very simple workflow that will go through and do what we want. Now, there's some minor nuances and things that need to be fixed, and I'm just rushing through this because it takes a little bit longer to configure these things. So what I'm going to do is this little workflow that we just built, I built it already. Yes, I did. And here it is. So it's the same thing. It's just got a little bit more information in it. So here's the object that we did, right? I did more with the assigned field values on this one, and I am choosing city records. And then I'm renaming it to PRA request. And then I do an ID because I'm doing a custom ID for it. And the only thing I'm doing with that, you guys, is grabbing a global identifier, the entry ID itself. I don't know if you knew this, but every time you store something in Laserfiche, it gives it a unique number. And that unique number can be viewed right next to the object in Laserfiche. It's a unique ID, allows you to do a lot of things. So that's stored in the name. Now watch what happens. Let me get this pulled up real quick. Let's see here. Laserfiche should be to be processed request. No. All right. So let's go into, and I'm going to talk about this in just a second. We have a starting rule that we need to talk about. Okay. Now the starting rule, I'm going to get to this folder real quick so it helps you guys wrap your head around it. Every workflow either has a starting rule or it gets called from, like, say, forms, or it gets called from quick fields, right? I've got this public records request folder here, right? Administration Quality Assurance Public Records Request. Now, if we go back and we look at our workflow that we designed, right, you'll notice that when I go over to this Rule Manager tab, this shows every workflow that I've ever created. Well, not every one of them, but every one that I have active in my server right now. And you notice that I have this public records request from PDF. That's the name of the workflow that we built, right? And its starting rule is right here. It says public records request. And down here, you notice it says starting event. If an entry is created, run this workflow if it is a PDF, and if the path equals Department's Administration Quality Assurance Public Records Request. Very simple. So that's a starting rule that says if it's created. We can add multiple rules here. I can add another starting rule that says, okay, let's make it a condition, or we can even schedule it, you guys. But this condition could be the exact same rule, but instead of the entry being created, we might want to say if somebody moved it there or copied it there, or if somebody changed it, then won this. So all of these things can be built into your starting rule. And I'd like to point out, you guys, too, that even though you're not getting all the details of how to build a starting rule, this, and anything, there's a help file that you can go to and type in what you're trying to do, and it gives you a very detailed explanations of how to do the particular function that you want to perform. Okay?
Craig, I have 2 questions when you're ready.
Okay. All right. So let me just drag and drop this in really quick, Kimberly, and we can see this workflow in action on the front end. So here's our public records request, right? And let me grab that form that we filled out, and I'm going to grab this from my computer or Windows Explorer, and I'm just going to drag it in to my Laserfiche repository. Okay? So we drug it into that folder that was in our starting rule, right? Public records request. It is a PDF, and I'm not going to assign a template or do anything else to it. I'm just going to import it, okay? And let's let that bring it in. Now, Kim, go ahead with your question while this is processing it. It's already done.
Sure. Can we get some clarification insofar as Laserfiche licensing goes? Like, for instance, if you are a full assigned user, you should have workflow. Can you kind of review the licensing?
Yeah. So We have a few different sets of licensing. We'll start with the Laserfiche core. So you have read-only licenses and you have named users, right? Named users can participate in workflow, whereas the read-only users cannot. In order to participate in workflow, you need to be able to collaborate, make a change, trigger, so to speak. Now, don't get me wrong, you could still participate in a workflow in a read-only fashion where you're reviewing data, and there's some ways around it, but if you're read-only, you're read-only. You can't really participate in workflow. Named user licenses use your Windows credentials and tie your user account from your Windows domain to the Laserfiche core, and also ties your Windows account to the Laserfiche Forms application on the front end. Now, let's talk about the users in Forms, because Forms is a little bit different. On the front end with Forms, you of course have the named users that carry over from the Laserfiche core, which is your Windows account, and you have full read-write access in Forms as well, using that same named user. However, Forms gives us another level of users, being a participant user, which we don't have in the core application. And a participant user can actually participate in the workflow of Forms, but does not have rights to Laserfiche. Okay?
Right, and that's for, like, say, if you're putting a form on your website for the general public, yes?
No, that's a little bit different. No, a participant is still an internal user, still somebody participating in your workflow. Now, the last one that we're going to talk about is the submitter. Now, submitter, of course, is just that. They're like the read-only person. They can only submit information into the forms. And with the submitter, there's two types of submitting. There's the internal portal for forms, and then there's a public-facing forms portal as well. And that's where your public user would actually interface with the municipality or the county agency or whatever agency you are. Okay? Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So just really to wrap this workflow up, let's go ahead and take a look at this PDF. So I drag and drop this in, and you'll notice that it, it renamed it to PRA request 49829, because we told it to rename it, for Gregory Heim. And it pulled that information from the form. So here it is. So it pulled all these fields that we told it, and it populated our Laserfiche template. Now, let's take this to one more quick level. And I know it's 12:04, but I got to just do one last thing here. We got an email address there.
And we have one more question, too.
Okay, so let me pull this up real quick. So public records request. Show you how simple this is. So we did this really simple workflow, but let me add one last thing. So we have, ad hoc decisions, and we have things that are built into workflow. So I'm going to do what's called a conditional decision, right? Conditional sequence, conditional decision. These are different flows that can come down. But my conditional decision is this. I'm going to put this at the very end, right? And in this branch, I want to say that if the entry field A, B, C, D, E, email, right, is not empty, meaning that there's an email address in the template field called email, then perform this action. Okay? What action do I want to perform? Well, you guys guessed it. I want to send an email, right? So I type in email up there. I find the email object. I'm going to drag it under this branch, okay? And let me configure this email. I want to send an email to retrieve the field content. I want to retrieve the email from the form that they filled out and actually put that in the email, right? And we'll just put in test for Ask Me Anything, AMA, I like that, webinar. All right, that's our subject, and here is my body of text. Okay, priority, well, sure, why not? I'll make it high. And yada, yada, yada. Now, I just did this in a side object, but you can actually open up this editor too. And what's nice about this is you can add tokens of information here, you guys. So if we want to customize this email, we can say, from the template fields that we pulled, we could take information from that and actually put it in the body of the email too, any one of these tokens. I'm just going to throw something in there. Address, city, and email, and full name. Okay, so very simple, very ugly, but effective. All right, so now let me just republish that. You notice up here I've got this little publish button, right? And it allows me to publish this workflow. Now, when I publish this, FYI too, it does a little troubleshooting on its own. And if there's any errors with your workflow, it posts them when we publish it, okay? All right, this one, however, went successfully. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag and drop that PDF back into our folder over here. So let me back up one here. Okay, so our folder was administration, quality assurance, public records. Okay. So this time, I'm going to drag and drop. I'm going to drop the same one in. So this time, it should recognize that there is an email address there, and it should send me an email, right? Import complete. Now, let's say, for example, it's broken or we're wondering what's going on with it. Remember we had this search tab down here, and I want to go to this. The top one that I use a lot is called recent activity within the last 15 minutes. So show me all the workflows in the last 15 minutes. Uh-oh, I had one that terminated. Why did it terminate? Can't bring it back. But it terminated on the email. Well, why? So up here, it tells me in the messages, failure sending email, public records request for PDF, email, failure sending email. Not 100% sure. Let's see here. Activities, messages, what have you. Okay. Form content, entries, details, and it most likely has to do, you guys, with retrieve PDF form content. Most likely didn't get the email from that. So just as a test, what I would normally do, because there's probably a problem with the token that it's trying to grab from the form, like maybe there's a space at the end of it or something like that. So what I'm going to do on this object is instead of grabbing the token just to test it, I'm going to put in a static email address, gheim@cps247.com, and I'm going to test this again because I just want to see if it's a problem with my workflow or if it's a problem on the server just sending an email. So by sending it to a static email address without the token, I now can figure out whether it's the token that's having a problem or whether my server is having a problem sending an email. So let's go ahead and re-trigger this by dropping it in again, and I'll get rid of the other ones. And I know we have to wrap this up, Kim, and I knew we were going to run a little bit long today, but that's okay.
Last call for questions also, yeah. And I have a question too.
Okay, let me just drag and drop this in one last time. All right, and public records requests and import. All right. And then, so I'm going to go back to my workflow, and remember, I have this search capability. I'm on the search tab, so show me. And if it doesn't work again this time, we're going to move past it, but it'll take a little bit more time to troubleshoot. So there's definitely something else going wrong with my server side. So from the looks of this, it might be a problem with how my email is configured to send on the server side. So this wouldn't be your issue. You probably wouldn't see this issue. It's actually an IT issue at this point. Because by putting that static email address in there, it should have sent it. So that tells me there's a problem with the core. Anyway, we're going to move past it. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question, Kim?
Sure. Greg, when we were planning to do this webinar, if you'll remember, I mentioned talking to clients regarding case studies using forms. And all of them have pretty much mentioned that they did not, they wanted to integrate the form with an external database to maybe auto-populate an address, but they didn't do it because they thought it would take too much time. And I'm not asking you to show it, but if you could just quickly talk through how easy that is and how much more elegant it makes the forms process.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think. You know what? Hang on just a minute. I might be able to show you something. Hang on, Kim.
Oh, well,
So,
if you can, great. If
oh
not, I
no,
wasn't
absolutely,
asking for
absolutely.
that.
So,
It's
so let
just,
me see here. So, I have, let's see here, add party to database. Here we go. So this is part of my contract management system, and I'm just going to show you a couple of quick things in here. So with this particular workflow, I've got an object down here that says insert party data, right?
yep.
And what this does is it looks at this data source called external tables, right? And if I go into this object and manage these data sources, you notice that I can add any data source that I want on the back end. I've got these data sources called external table, and this is configured to have a direct connection to my SQL server, right?
That's cool. Yeah.
Now, with that said, this is the configuration in Laserfiche. Let me open up this, and I don't do this very often, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. I hope I don't get myself in trouble by you guys, bugging your IT. Hey, can I have access to your SQL server? I got some stuff I want to do for finance. I love it. Anyway, taking a quick minute here. What I'm going to open up here is I'm going to open up the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. Now, this is what any one of your DBAs use to manage your data for any application. I mean, nowadays, most of your applications, whether it be a CRM or whether it be RMS or whether it be, the PD with the CAD, all those other kind of things, any type of application runs off of an SQL database. And bigger organizations use a database called Oracle because it's just a more robust for larger organizations. But most people can get away with just using SQL Server. Now, you'll notice on the front end we had that direct connection to a table, right, in our database, a table called external tables. And this is a table that I created inside of Laserfiche, okay? Now, inside of here, if you look at the tables that are in here, it's got DBO, AP clean data, AP metadata, so on and so forth. These, again, are fields that I created. Now, believe it or not, you guys, I brought these in as an Excel spreadsheet. So I created them in Excel and saved them out as a CSV, or comma delimited file, and then imported them into SQL so it would create my database. Now, this particular is an AP clean data. This is one that I use for my accounts payable, where it can look out at all the different variables for, the documents that are being pushed through receiving the POs, the whole 9 yards, and it references this table to complete the workflow process on the front end. So on the front end, I think the one that I was showing is add party to database or something like that. I'm not sure if I see that one here. I think it's, let me go back over to it real quick. External tables configured, and this one is, CH_contracted parties is what it's looking for. So it's looking at this database over here, and it's looking for CH contracted parties to look into. So let's take a look at that, okay? So in here, this has got the registered corporation, party name, or the vendor. It's got the contact for that vendor. It's got the email, address, contact phone, all this other information, right? And so there's the table that's built. And in our workflow, you guys, it comes out here. We have that reference set up to it. But in this insert party data, we have this very simple interface that says, okay, the column party name that's in that external thing, go ahead and populate that with the field value retrieved from the form. So we have a form on the front end, right? And we're saying, hey, take the information from the form and put it in party name. Take the information from the form, put it in contact name, so on and so forth, right? And this is actually updating that SQL table on the back end. And so what this does is it goes through and inserts the party data. Now, if it's already there, I should have some kind of catch in here that says, hey, check to see if the party is registered and then move past it. If they're unregistered, then go ahead and insert it. But if they're registered, go ahead and read the data and continue on. And it's very simple. It's just a simple configuration to an external table, a direct connection to SQL using Windows authentication, because the account that we're using has the rights to do it. Now, this is one of the instances, you guys, you have to get with IT. You have to get with them. They have to set this up. You have to have the credentials to get to it. But it's not hard to do once it's configured. And if they give you access to your own external table like mine, every business process that I do is under this external tables database, okay? Every table that I use for my integrations in Laserfiche are under this one database. So if they give you one database and you can just mess around in that one database, they'll be happy that you're not going to affect anything else that you have there, and you can just have the fun and leisure of using Laserfiche to update, retrieve, and to manage data using Laserfiche workflow in an SQL format. It's pretty cool. And keep that same principle, Kim, and think about Microsoft Exchange. Writing calendar events and writing tasks, and sending emails is one thing you do, but we can also interface with Microsoft Exchange since Laserfiche is Windows integrated, and we can write calendar events, and we can write tasks to the task scheduler and the whole 9 yards. It's the same principle in workflow. And you guys remember, if you guys look at this workflow, remember I told you it's a trickle-down thing, right? And when it hits a parallel, like this is a parallel, it's still flowing downhill, but now it's flowing in 2 different strands. Then it comes back together, and it keeps flowing until it pops out the bottom. And all of these objects are all in this toolbox on the left-hand side. Let me get rid of the email thing up there. And they're all categorized, and you just have to think about what it is you're trying to do and find the object, experiment with the object, use the help file. And if all else fails, using your own wits, pick up the phone. But I want to reiterate that it is better for you to figure it out, to have that knowledge, than to call somebody and use them for a crutch, because then you're not really doing it yourself, okay? You're not really learning it yourself. And what I do with my customers a lot of the time, we don't go major into detail, but I always take them through and explain while we're configuring, while we're working things out, while we're setting things up, the reason why that we do it. Now, there are best practices in workflow too, and things that you guys should be aware of. And one of the key things is creating loops. So we always have a thing where we create a workflow user called WF user, and we always put it in our workflow rules. We always put it in our rule manager, our starting rule. So if you look at the starting rule for one of these things that's not called by, hang on a minute, let me find one that has a good starting rule here. Boy, nothing wants to come up with a starting rule. I guess my machine is a little overtaxed here. Hang on a minute. Well, I don't know why nothing's coming up here. It's having a problem previewing it. But we put that WF user in there to say, hey, go ahead and perform this workflow, unless it's the workflow user doing it. Because you find what happens when you have the changed or modified item, that when workflow does it, it can create these vicious loops where it changes something, but then it recognizes that change, and then it changes it again. And then you notice that after a while, you see documents in this one folder that have a parenthesis 2, parenthesis 3, parenthesis 200, parenthesis 2000, parenthesis 20,000, right? Because it's creating all these duplicate documents. Now you know you have a runaway workflow that's going to crash your server. So those, I don't want to scare you with stuff like that, but it's definitely a disclaimer that I got to put out there, and that's probably the biggest one. And definitely check with your value-added reseller, or what do they call them now, Kimberly?
I believe it's Laserfiche Partner.
Laserfiche Partner, thank you. And just, get a little bit of tutelage. If you're one of my customers, please feel free to reach out, to us at support@cps247.com and schedule some time with me. I'm more than willing to help just about anybody out to just get them started. We're not going to do your workflows for you, but if you have questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them, after the fact as well, through simple correspondence. Workflow, I have to say this, you guys, I love workflow. I love the Forms workflow. I love QuickFields. I love Laserfiche workflow. I love what it can do for us in a business environment. Love what it can do for us as far as writing business processes and automating collaboration and approval efforts, and also integration with third-party systems. Laserfiche allows us, and there's some other applications that we might have to show in maybe the level 2 of workflow, which is the Laserfiche connector, which allows us to connect to our third-party primary or legacy applications that we use in other departments. So there's a lot to this, but it's very interesting once you dive in with both feet, and it's very addictive, I would say. to actually do these workflows and have fun with them. It's what keeps me coming back. It's why, after 24 years, I'm still excited about every implementation and everything that we still do here at Complete Paperless Solutions. So I'm going to wrap this up real quick, but I do want to point out a couple of other quick things. And I know that there have been some of our customers and other customers in the past that weren't aware of a couple of resources that they have available. Excuse me. And I want to point them out real quick. The first is right here. This is the Laserfiche support site, okay? This is support.laserfiche.com. Now, if you don't have a Laserfiche support account, I want to encourage you to get one, okay? Support.laserfiche.com. If you go to the sign in button, right, and you don't have an account, you'll notice that it has the ability to register a new account. The only thing you need to register a new account is the serial number from your product, okay? And you can get that from your Laserfiche partner or from your license file, right? So once you have that serial number, you just put in your name, last name, email, and you submit it. Now, your Laserfiche partner will give you the appropriate rights, to the Laserfiche site. And let me show you just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and log in. But what's nice about this resource is it gives you knowledge base. It gives you access to downloads for your product, so you can update your product. You want to check with your partner before you do anything like that. And of course, they'll have to give you rights to it if they want you to, but that's how it works out. Knowledge base is out there. Laserfiche Answers is really cool. If you've got a question, it's a forum. You can go out and pick a category and see, issues that other users may or may not have that are related to what's going on with you. Learning resources are really cool. They got video tutorials, different types of solutions and trainings and things like that. So I would encourage you to get a Laserfiche account if you do not have one. The second resource that I'd like to point out is Complete Paperless Solutions. Ours is a little bit different. We have informational resources, and I call these industry-related short stories. Kimberly does a great job of helping us organize and put these articles out, and there's just a plethora of different topics, different things that we discuss, some being technical, some being just organizational, some being, looking forward to the future and technologies that are coming out. It's a great resource for you to check out. And then we've also filtered these out to our training resources. And our training resources have, webinars and tutorials, video shorts, things like that. It's got tech tips. We just put this tech tip out on how to import a Laserfiche form, which we just did today. When this webinar is processed and rendered, you will find this webinar out here eventually, as well as a resource for you to watch and to use as well. So we'd welcome you guys to check out our website and the Laserfiche support site if you have not got an account. With that, Kimberly, I'm going to stop rambling. Do you have anything or any other questions that you need to put out before we wrap this thing up?
No, I think we're good question-wise. Thank you very much, Greg, and thank you, audience members. We enjoyed the participation, and I just want to leave you with a sum-up of Greg's presentation, which is essentially Laserfiche is like potato chips. You can't eat just one, right? We appreciate everybody here, and just one more reminder that we did record the webinar, and we'll be posting it on our website probably by the end of the week, Monday at the latest. I'll send out an email to make sure that you get that. Please make sure to check out all the informational resources. We write about project management quite a bit too, so hopefully that's helpful. And tech tips and Greg's videos. Thank you again for making time to join us today, and we will see you on the next webinar.